Chapter 21, Unifying Concepts of Animal Structure and Function. With Chapter 21, we basically jump into a new unit to finish off our semester. So we'll look at the structural organization of animals. Life overall is characterized by a hierarchy of organization from the simplest building blocks up to the most complex organisms. And in animals, cells are grouped into tissues. So cells are the individual cells of the body, and life is cellular in the sense that anything that is smaller than a cell, like a molecule or an organelle, is not considered to be alive. So cells are grouped together to form tissues, and tissues are aggregations of similar type cells that form particular functions. And then the tissues combine to form organs, like say the heart here. That means the heart, which is an organ, and any other organ in your body, is made up of at least 3, if not all 4 tissue types. So organs are made up of different tissues. And then the organs are combined into organ systems. Like, for example, here, the heart attached to the blood vessels. So that's representative of the circulatory system, sometimes called the cardiovascular system. And then all of the organ systems unite to form the intact, complete organism. And we'll talk about the organ systems as we go through this chapter. So, structure and function are essential to life, and life has evolved certain structures, like the shape of the heart, to perform particular functions, or say the shape of a feather to form a particular function. So, this brings us to anatomy and physiology. So the anatomy, that's the structure of the organism's parts, like the shape of a bone, the internal structure, shape of feathers, nerve cells, shape of the heart, its chambers, etc. Examination, study of the parts of an organism. Now the parts have particular functions, so that's the physiology, the study of the function of an organism's parts. So a bone in a bird is very lightweight, and the bones are hollow and lightweight, and the function of that is to have the bones be lightweight, but yet still strong and allow the bird to fly. Comparatively, a similar size bone, in proportionately similar size bone in a human, would be considerably heavier. Or say the shape of the heart allows it to do its particular function, and that is to contract the chambers of the heart, and in doing so moving blood through the heart and pumping blood out of the heart. So that's the function of the anatomical structures of the heart. So there's always a correlation between structure and function and physiology and anatomy. So this correlation is functional to biology, fundamental to biology. It's evident in all levels of life's hierarchy. If we consider the simplest level, the cell, a neuron cell, a nerve cell, has a particular shape or anatomy, and that allows it to have its particular physiological function. And the same for muscle cells and blood cells and all other cells. But then the same for tissues and organ systems. They have their particular anatomical structure that allows them to do their physiological functions, like the heart. The cells and the tissues of the heart are able to contract and propel blood from chambers of the heart through other chambers of the heart, and then out of the heart into the blood vessels to be propelled throughout the body to deliver nutrients and oxygen and carry away waste materials. So let's look at tissues. So the cell is a basic unit of all living organisms. Biologically speaking, if something is not comprised of a cell, it's not considered to be alive. And there's many single-celled organisms. We've talked about things like bacteria and protists, those sorts of things. In all animals, which are multicellular, cells are grouped into tissues. There's an exception with the sponges, but we won't get into that now. So the cells are combined into tissues. So a tissue is an integrated group of similar type cells that perform a specific function. So probably the easiest example to think of is muscle tissue. Muscle tissue is comprised of muscle cells, and their specific function is to contract, and in doing so, move the body or move food through the body or move blood through the body. So animals have 4 categories or types of tissues. We have epithelial tissue, which is represented up here. Epithelial tissue, think of your skin. We have connective tissue, and the word connection, think of like ligaments and tendons, structures that connect muscle and bone, or connective tissue that's connecting your overlying skin to the underlying muscle. Connective tissue. Cartilage, for example, is connective tissue as well. And interestingly, so is blood. Then we have muscle tissue. Mentioned that already. Type of tissue that's involved in movement of some sort. And then lastly, the integrating tissue that helps coordinate everything is nervous tissue. Brain and spinal cord in humans. So epithelial tissue, I mentioned, think of your skin. So epithelial tissue or epithelium covers the surface of the body and lines the digestive tract and also certain organs like the lungs and the stomach and the heart. So the architecture, the morphology, the shape of the epithelium, its structure will fit its function. So depending on where it is located in the body, the epithelium is going to be very thick or very thin. So the skin, right, your outer covering, your outer epithelium, has many layers of cells because your skin is in contact with the environment and there's abrasion, and it provides a good source of protection. It's a nice protective barrier. It's fairly waterproof in humans, many mammals, and it protects us from external threats, germs, bacteria, those sorts of things. That's why it's dangerous when you get a cut, because then you get to the underlying blood vessels, and then that provides an entry route for bacteria, for example. If bacteria are just on the surface of your skin, they have no easy way to get down into your body. And then, like abrasion, that's why the soles of your feet and the palms of your hand have fairly thick skin, because those are parts of the body that experience a lot of friction. But if we contrast that with the epithelium or the epithelial lining of blood vessels, especially the smallest blood vessels, the capillaries, it's really thin. It's only a single layer of epithelium and a little bit of connective tissue. So thin that it allows for easy movement by diffusion of materials out of the blood capillaries and then into the blood capillaries. Your blood was pumped through your body by the heart and the blood vessels. And when it gets to all the tissues in the body, the blood vessels get really small to form capillaries, and that's where exchanges are going to occur. In other words, oxygen and blood sugar, glucose leave the capillaries through diffusion because they're very thinly walled, and then waste material and carbon dioxide diffuse in the opposite way into the bloodstream, so your cardiovascular and urinary system can get rid of those things, including the respiratory system. Okay? So again, your epithelium can be really thick or really thin, depending on where it is and what function it needs to perform. So the body is continuously renewing these cells in many of the epithelial tissues, especially the thick ones. Remember mitosis, right? Cell division to replace cells. Right? Your skin cells are constantly being abraded off, flaking off. So there's a layer of skin cells, epithelial cells, that are constantly undergoing mitosis. So that's constant rapid cell division, right, throughout most of the skin on your body. However, it's so rapid and it's exposed to environmental contaminants and potential carcinogens, including ultraviolet sunlight, and that increases the risk of mutational errors in cell division, and that can lead to cancer. Basically, cancer is uncontrolled, unregulated cell division, like mitosis that has gone crazy. Okay, let's move on to connective tissue. Connective tissue is kind of unique because it's comprised of a lot of different types of structures. For example, cellular tissue arrangements. So for example, bone, excuse me, my cursor went to sleep. There we go, bone. It's a hard, solid connective tissue. Blood is a liquid connective tissue. Adipose is a very kind of soft connective tissue. Adipose tissue is fat. And loose connective tissue, just the way the words describe the tissue is loose connective. It's a really soft connective tissue. Fibrous connective tissue is really tough and strong, binding bones and muscle together. And then there's cartilage, which is relatively kind of semi-soft, semi-rigid. The soft part of your nose, the tip of your nose, it's kind of spongy in a way because that's cartilage in there underneath the skin. So connective tissue, the cells are scattered throughout a material that surrounds the cells that's called the extracellular matrix. So that's unique or very characteristic of connective tissue. So you have cells surrounded by extracellular matrix. If the extracellular, right outside the cells, if the extracellular matrix is really hard and solid, you have like bone connective tissue. If the extracellular matrix is liquidy and runny, well then that's blood. The cells are the blood cells. And the plasma is the extracellular liquid matrix. With cartilage, the cells are surrounded by a rubbery extracellular matrix. Okay. So this extracellular matrix is very characteristic of connective tissue. So the structure and texture of the matrix varies, and then matches the function of each connective tissue. For example, the structure and the consistency of the matrix, extracellular matrix in blood is watery, runny, and that allows the blood to move easily through the blood vessels. The extracellular matrix in bone is really hard and strong and tough, and that allows bones to be really hard and strong and support our weight and allow us to move when the muscles pull against the bones at the joints. So two major functions of the connective tissue are to support, think of bone and ligaments and tendons, and to join other tissues, think of the ligaments and tendons. So for example, here in the knee joint, the knee joint's held together by ligaments and tendons that help bind the joint together, support the joint. And then there's muscle, which is attached to the bone through connective tissue. And then the overlying skin is connected to the underlying muscle, connected loosely, but is connected by connective tissue. So connective tissue helps bind your body's tissues together, helping bind the joints together, give you an internal framework, the skeleton, and then even allows for protection. Think of the rib cage and the skull, bone and bony ribs to protect those structures inside, organs inside, like the brain, lungs, and heart. So a lot of different functions for the connective tissue. So one type of connective tissue is loose connective tissue, right here. And it's the most widespread connective tissue in the body, and it binds the epithelia, overlying skin, to the underlying tissue. So it's everywhere. Another type of connective tissue is fibrous connective tissue down here. It's a dense, strong matrix of collagen, which is protein fibers that are really strong. So it forms tendons, and tendons attach muscles to bone. So the muscles that are attached to bone that allow for movement at the joints are attached to the bones via tendons. If you ever hear of an Achilles tendon tear, that's a tendon that's attaching the calf muscles down to your heel bone and allows you to kind of push off, like when you're stepping forward, and then pushing off, stepping backwards, pushing back to move forward. Okay, and then ligaments also. Those bind bone to bone. So if you ever heard of an ACL tear, anterior cruciate ligament, that's a ligament that's binding the femur of the knee joint down to the tibia of the knee joint within the knee. Cartilage is strong but very flexible, and we'll continue on cartilage on the next section.